Morning. So this is me just getting settled in for a day. Back to work on a Monday, working in the office, and some interesting requests have started coming in on social media. I've been working on these Infinity White Company. You're not going to be able to see this at this distance, obviously, but I'll give you a zoom. And they're a pretty interesting scheme. They're sort of a mix of Yuqing, Pan-Oceania, and a little bit of other stuff from Infinity's universe. Some mercenary stuff and things like that. Pretty cool, pretty interesting. And I've got a commission on for 9 models of them. And I explained my painting approach sort of in rough terms to a few people when I initially posted about it on social media. And folks were immediately a bit surprised. They sort of looked at the result and said, well, that doesn't look speed painted. What have you done to make that speed painted but not look speed painted? And I kind of realised I've never really gone over the way I approach white armour like this on things like Infinity miniatures. I've done it on Battletech mechs and I don't use the same method. So I thought it might be cool, even though we are halfway into this commission, to actually pop in now and take a little look-see at how I do this white armour and how I actually do the scheme as a whole, so that you can see how about 2.5 hours a miniature can get you some pretty decent looking models and get you a good army in no time. Obviously if you collect White Company this is going to be really handy, but the scheme is also exactly the same as, for example, White Scars from Warhammer 40k. It's white, red and black, so there's going to be some other uses for it too. So come on over and I'll pull that camera off the stand and put it onto this one, and I'll show you actually, as I'm halfway through this commission, what I do to get these painted to look how they do without spending absolutely ages on them. And t-shirt change. Filming this on 2 different days, sorry. So first and foremost, I just want to show you a couple of simple bits that you've missed that I've already done previously before being asked to film this process. These are really just simple prep jobs, setup jobs is what I call them, getting ready for the bulk of the actual painting. So what I've done is started with Vallejo model colour light grey and then Vallejo model colour white. And I applied that like as a zenithal. If you've never seen a zenithal before, you start with a black undercoat, spray the grey from a top-down sort of direction, and then spray the white just to sort of accent the top part of the miniature. It's very straightforward. If you've never done one, there are a ton of tutorials out there on YouTube that you can check out, and they'll show you how to do this process. It's not difficult or technical, it's just maybe not in the purview of this video. However, one of the particularly cool things about Zenithal is that you can also do it with a rattle can. So whilst it's not always the most useful process, and a lot of the time I don't even use it at all, in the case of something like this, it's really for everyone, and it does make painting that white a hell of a lot easier. So I do recommend either going out there and grabbing some rattle cans of black, grey and white, or getting your airbrush out and trying this method. From there we need to jump into doing some all over shading, and believe it or not, Nuln Oil from Citadel is actually the key ingredient here. However, it does need some help just to be a bit smoother and not to be so dramatic. So what I do is I mix in a little Vallejo Flow Improver and a bit of Vallejo Glaze Medium. Just a few drops of each, sort of about equal parts of everything really. And then I start just adding a touch of water to it to get it down to the transparency I want. Obviously you want it to be darker than the darkest points on the miniature so that it acts as a shade, but you don't want it to pull the grey down too far because we're not going to do a bunch of highlighting steps afterwards. Besides that, as you can see, the only other stage here that I've done is I've just blacked out any areas I want black or dark grey. So this literally just has the zenithal on it, then the wash, then, you know, some thorough drying time, and then black for, you know, weapons, undersuits, pouches and holsters. It's a total of probably about half an hour's work to get all of the models to this stage. It really doesn't take very long. But now that I've shown you that setup stuff, we're in a much better position because I can actually start showing you in real time what the next steps are. And these are the real secrets to getting, you know, a pretty nice looking white finish that doesn't take ages. Obviously, this is not as refined as a really slow and purposeful approach would be, but I think you'll agree when you see the final results that it is pretty cool. So the first thing we need to do is highlight the greys and blacks, and this is to give us a point of reference for how far we're going to highlight our whites. So we're just creating that kind of visual relationship so that our eye can dial in how bright or dull to make everything. We do all of this with just 4 colours, Vallejo model colour for all of them, black, intermediate blue, light grey and white. And the only tip I would really give is you'll want to be comfortable with mixing as you go here, you know, doing some mixing by eye, because that's a lot of what we're going to do. The clever part, I suppose, in all of this is really more in how they're applied. With the grey areas being fabric, they're highlighted pretty evenly, but for the most part I don't take them up super bright. Whereas things like the gun casings and the belts I highlight very finely with mostly edge highlights, and I take the brightness up pretty high with them, especially on like the corners and edges. So that's what creates the difference. Even though we're using all of the same colours here, we're able to get visual differences between the fabrics and the belts and the guns and stuff like that. And then once all of those fabrics and belts and guns and all of that are done, and we've got all those highlights in, then we can move on to doing that white. And as I say, it is a very simple process. It's not designed to be the most fine rendering of white. It's designed to be just a very approachable way to paint white that isn't going to tax you too hard, isn't going to make you, feel like you're working too hard to achieve it. So the first stage involves actually going back to that light grey first of all, and we're just going to dab in the beginnings of like some volumetric highlights, just picking some broad areas where light would hit, upward facing usually, any other sort of light catching edges. You can do a few edge highlights with the grey as well, but we'll mostly save that for the next step. And then after that we'll go over to the pure white and we'll mostly picking out edges here. We can accent some of those volumes, again there's no reason to stay away from those, but you're mostly looking for edges. If there's one thing I want to communicate here, it's that when you're trying to paint faster, you really don't want to feel like you need to hit every single edge with a full set of highlights. Hit the ones that are most seen by all means, but don't chase them around the miniature looking for 100% completion. From there we're going to move on to the reds, which are again very simple. This is just what I call a workup, so starting at a very dark colour and mixing through to a light one on the fly. I do a lot of my painting like this these days, just relying on my eye to mix as I go. So the colours I'm using here are Vallejo model colour Cavalry Brown, P3 Cador Red base and P3 Cador Red highlight. The application is a really simple affair, just base coat in the darkest colour, the Cavalry Brown, and then mix and apply a lower mid-tone with the P3 Cador Red and the Cavalry Brown mixed together. Then the P3 Red on its own as an upper mid-tone, drop in a few fine highlights with the orangey P3 highlight colour on its own. I'll occasionally blend a little if I feel the need to, but I mostly just stipple and create texture because you don't really need to be afraid of that as long as it's uniform across the model. If you're trying to do really fine blends and stippling at the same time, then sometimes one or the other can look out of place, but for the most part, as long as you do all one thing, it's going to look pretty good. So as you can see, with just a few short processes, we're not far off completion now. It's pretty amazing how fast this comes together, to be honest. However, there are a few little sort of very quick flourishes I also do, just to bring things to a finish really. First among these, I do a really thinned down bright green and then a really thinned down dark green, both applied in and around the eyes. So I do the bright green first in a broader stroke, and then move on to the dark green in a narrower, more controlled approach. This just gives a nice glowing look to the eyes. Again, because they're painted bright, it's a really simple way to just add some interest. I also use a super thin down orange and the same sort of technique for the LED looking things around the model. One of the nice advantages of a neutral base like this is these quick colour pops look glowy with very little work. If you really want to jazz them up though, you can touch a little bit of white into the centres, either before or after you put the very thin down paint in, one or the other, it doesn't matter. And that will give sort of varying degrees of that intensity towards the centre that again just helps create a glowy look. And really that draws us to a close. It's a very simple, very quick way to paint White Company. It's a little more dynamic than just doing a base coat and a flat wash, which is a lot of what I see, people feeling like they're restricted to when they want to quote unquote speed paint something. But at the same time, it's also far less involved than getting into, doing perfect blends and really precision applications. And for me, that's a really nice spot to be when, trying to get an army on the table. So whether you intend to use this for white company as I have, or whether you want to use it for white scars, or maybe a Comstar battle mech for your Battletech collection, whatever you want to try this on, I hope you enjoy it, I hope you find it useful. For me, it's my go-to way of painting white when I'm on a bit of a time crunch. If you enjoyed the tutorial, of course, don't forget to pop it a little like, maybe consider subscribing to the channel so you can see more stuff like this. And if you really want to support the creation of the content, I do have a Patreon, which is linked below. Tiers start from just £1 a month, and you get a bunch of cool benefits going all the way up. So all that remains is the usual way that we wrap up these videos. Thank you so much for watching, folks. I will see you in the next one. I'd like to wish you happy hobbying, and bye-bye for now.